All right. Welcome everyone to the Grow Room by Grow the High. I'm Joey. I'm with TJ and Yash. Hey guys.
Hello, how are you?
Hey, how's it going?
So today we're talking about maximizing yields. Now, again, one of the biggest topics any grower is going to have is how am I gonna maximize my yields for my plants? And this is a topic I think we definitely had to cover. So for the very first question, is is this something that's under our control, or is this more the plants? Is this more hereditary?
It's a little bit of both. Um, so first thing that I'd consider when you're trying to maximize your yields is, obviously looking at the genetics. Trusting reliable growers and breeders is like a really important step in like knowing where the genetics are. And you gotta really take that into account because these genetics, based on where they, are, or originating from, they're gonna be used to different kind of conditions, and you
Oh,
kind of want to tailor, what you do around those conditions, or pick plants that work in the conditions that you want to work in.
so
So,
so just to clarify, you're saying that a plant's biology and
Mhm.
then a plant's environment, including how its biology reacts to that environment,
Mm.
is potentially a big factor here.
Yeah. Cause like to maximize yield, right? You want to, get the conditions to a maximum point of what that plant wants. Right? You gotta, I talked about it in previous episodes. Some plants are going to be hungrier than others. Some are going to need one specific nutrient than another plant would, and that is a lot of your genetics setting in. So to maximize yield, you have to kind of maximize uh, what the conditions that your plant is optimal in.
so are you saying that certain strains produce more yields than others?
Yeah, so like every plant, just like with like humans, every plant has like a genetic max cap. Um, and that's, once you got those genes, until, you mix those genes with something else, it's not really going to, change. That's why, like, you'll see a lot of times, like, people will list a range of THC potency for like any given strain. Or, when they're actually selling it, they have it printed the exact one that one was tested at. So like two plants of the same strain can have different yields. Just because like if they're not from the same mother plant, right? There's a chance they have different
Mhm.
genetics. Um, and if they're from the same mother plant, then they would have the same like max cap, like if they're clones.
So, before we continue, I'm just wondering, like, when you say yields, right? And I just want to like clarify some definitions. Like, do you mean THC potency or like how much product you're getting from the plant?
Yield refers to how much product you've gotten, how much typically the dry weight um of the bud, so the weight after you've cured it.
And that's a good point.
So,
So do when people are growing, like as say commercially, what do you think they focus on more? The THC quantity or the amount of flower produced?
Um, I think. Ooh, that's tough. Well, that's kind of like
Okay, that's a good
individualistic
answer
theory,
alone. So I mean
theory, right?
it's between
Like
the
I'd
two.
imagine it's split. Yeah.
Okay.
Some.
so
What was that? Yes.
no, no. What I was gonna say then is, and I think this goes to what Joey was saying. Now, does the amount of yield affect THC potency, or do smaller yields give a higher THC potency than larger yields, or is it the other way around, or it doesn't matter?
Um, no. So the THC potency, I don't believe there's a direct correlation between the two. I've heard plenty of stories of people having small yields but really good flowers. Like I said, that's some strains are genetically prone to making small buds. So but can still have like really good quality high THC. Um, I'm
Does
I'm
any of
unsure.
this affect the taste or the flavor, or is that completely independent as well?
I'd imagine again that's independent because that comes from the quality. Also part genetics. Some are just gonna have natural taste.
Right.
Um, and different smells based on like their terpene profile.
So okay,
Uh,
I mean that brings us to an important question. What are what can we expect to happen in the process of us trying to maximize yields, right? Like, can we expect to maybe lose some of that taste, or do you think it's like just a life cycle thing, and you know
um,
we'll get different yields and just
I'd
better flavor
imagine
maybe?
if you're maximizing yield, I mean, it does depend quite how you do it, right? Because it's like if you're not when it comes to maximizing yields, it's a lot of like micro interactions that add up, and paying attention to what your plant needs. So if you do, everything correctly, respond correctly to what the plant's telling you, and even go a bit above and beyond, it it may, a lot of it also comes down to keeping the environment. I don't think it doesn't affect like the taste because that's more like a quality versus quantity thing, and I've never heard of like something having higher yield being like lower grade or vice versa even really.
Okay.
So when speaking about the environment, right? Does like when you want to get more, right? Does like
Mm.
the growing medium matter? Like if it's like a hydroponic system, an outdoor system, or if you're using different growing mediums,
It,
essentially, right?
it does and doesn't. It does because it changes what you have to do to get the maximum yield, right? Like, you don't have to, with like soil, you have to cultivate your soil to, be nutrient rich, get your composting, do a bunch of things to it to make it ready to grow. And then, on the flip side, when you're using something like rock wool, right, something that is like a neutral substrate, um, you have to be sure to be, constantly double checking that your nutrients are mixed correctly. If you're using meters, constantly check your meters. It's also important to clean your meters because, like, sometimes nutrient builds up on it when it dries, and it'll throw up your reading. Like, it changes what you need to do to, maintain the maximum you can do with your environment. Um, but otherwise, like there's really not like at least for commercial style growings, there's really not like a huge difference in what you would produce. Um, it just changes how you have to use it.
So is the type of farming does that matter too? If it's
Good question.
like vertical farming versus like horizontal, if you're growing up
Or even
rather than out?
hydroponics
Um,
versus non hydroponics.
Yeah. So that's
there's
the one.
there's like plus and minuses to every style, right? And that's really what you got to think about when you're choosing which style you want to go through,
But
because
which one can give us the most yields?
they all can.
Okay,
Like
that's a good answer too.
there's
Okay.
so they
I think what
there's
Joey's
differences in like I was trying to get to what strengths they have. Like for example, soil typically, if your soil's not, up to par, um, there's a lot of work you gotta go through to getting that, and usually that takes a couple harvests. So typically, soil growers, they tend to have an upward trend.
Hmm.
The more harvests they get to, because the soil gets worked on more. Um, then you have things like aeroponics is like really good with like clones and like seedlings. Like their root structures grow really nice and quickly. So like they actually can shorten time from getting your clone to into reaching adulthood. And then there's things like hydroponics, you know, offers kind of a balance between the two. You need like kind of a lot of technical knowledge for aeroponics. Um, so, the amount of studying and maintaining that perfect environment is a lot more important because the roots are kind of exposed, and they have like things like, because the roots are all clumped together, you gotta be really careful with them getting knotted and stuff.
So what I think Joey was trying to ask, and tell me if I'm wrong here, is like you have a brand. Let's say there's a brand new cannabis person growing, right? Someone who's fresh into the industry. What is the safest way, what's the safest type of growing, I guess? Like hydroponics, aeroponics, right? For him to maximize his yields in the beginning if he's brand new.
That's also a good question. Yes.
Um, Again, that's like up to the person.
What
Like
about?
Like
for me personally, it's always been hydroponics. Hydroponics kind of clicks with me. I like the kind of stability in routine, and like just the control you can have in your environment with that kind of setup. Um, Other people, they, good with soil, and good at mixing soil, and that's a huge part of outdoor growing. Greenhouses, provide kind of a middle ground. Um, I there's not there's never been any proven like study to show that one is like incredibly superior to the other, because like I said, it's with the genetics of the plants involved, right? Different plants are going to max out yields in hydroponic type situations where they wouldn't in outdoor, and vice versa, right? So it's really what you're comfortable with is going to get you and your knowledge on that particular type is really what's going to get to the maximum yields, not the style.
So
so what oh
yeah. So
go ahead, Joey.
I mean, talking about the like best environments and potentially how we can select the best way to grow it. Say great. We know that that's going to give us a certain amount of yield, and maybe you're
Mm.
right that it's something it's about the person's individual, how best can they deal with that way of growing. But now what I think is what we should talk about is basically what are the limits, right? So we have this conversation that comes around every now and then about super plant, and
Mm.
uh, my definition is different than what we're going to be talking about here. But in this conversation, what what are some of the things we can do to a plant that we know increases yield, and are there limits?
Okay. So certain things like that, and again, this is like uh not really specific, because like
And get
there's
into the
things.
fringe science if you know any. I'll take rumors too, but
Uh, okay,
yeah.
so there's things like maximizing your canopy and spreading your leaves as much as possible, making sure that like basically every hole is covered
Hmm.
is really important. Keeping an even canopy is also important because you don't want to be like wasting light. There's certain things like with indoor growers. There is you can introduce CO2 canisters and put extra CO2 into the
Oh.
environment. There is um, I've heard things of I've never done it myself, but using like silica products in the nutrients, they supposedly good for like building strong stalks.
Hmm.
Um, and having a stronger stalks means they can deal with stress better. It also means that they absorb nutrients more efficiently. So there's also there's making sure a lot of people are afraid to like move your plants into bigger pots because it is quite dangerous. The roots are exposed. You really don't want to damage them. But making sure that the space is big enough for roots, and theoretically, you're not trying to get your roots so tight. You're trying to get them to kind of spread out as much as they can, um, so that they can like breathe. Um, roots need air, which is a weird thing to think about, but roots do need air.
That is interesting.
Uh,
Yeah.
um, there's uh, there's tons of things that affect it. I mean, like I said before, checking nutrients daily if you're an indoor grower. Um,
So then
c-
let's just focus on like say two or three things like temperature control, nutrients, and light, right?
okay.
Like if we're
That's a
talking about like light, for example, what I mean, like can you increase yields to the maximum by just like really lighting that shit up? Like
I
lights
mean, not
everywhere.
just because you need the whole
Say
equation for
can that
photosynthesis.
increase it?
So you can. So, but if you increase the amount of light, right, you're going to need increased water and increased CO2. Um,
And
so
then
you do
would it do would that do it? Would it keep going?
it does help, yeah. Yeah,
so
yeah,
what
yeah. A plant is essentially just a straw. I mean, obviously, there's limitations when you're feeding it. You can't just keep feeding it, especially with liquid nutrients, because you'll get things like chemical burns.
Right.
But giving them like plain water and increasing, keeping your normal feeding schedule, but potentially increasing the water as well as the CO2. Light, yeah, they can help maximize your yield. Um,
So we're just trying to push its natural process to the limit
yeah,
here.
yeah.
Now
y-
do people breed for this for
Yeah.
so
maximizing yields?
Oh, of course, yeah. Um,
How big is that in the industry? Is that like one of the
I'd
biggest ones?
imagine that's most of the game. I'd
so
imagine almost every grower is going to sit there, or every breeder, I should say, is going to sit there and try and make a plant that has more yields than the last, because that's
More money.
it's a less work or it's same amount of work for more money, right?
Hmm.
So that is just the name of the game. Um, they are going to be people that make themselves their own name by growing things that other people aren't growing. Um, you know, like I've said before, different strains have different difficulties when it comes to growing. So some strains are only grown by a select few just because most people can't you know tend to its needs correctly.
Do you think
Um,
we've reached the end of that line of maximizing yields through genetic
so
breeding?
I don't think so. I think, but like it takes time. It's evolution, right? You need to go through multiple harvests before you're really going to start to see anything. And I mean, like it's
But then if you did, you'd want to
mm,
keep that prize strain to yourself, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. And like I said in I think our first podcast or first uh talk, yeah, you can patent a strain. So I mean,
That's kind of cool.
yeah.
Good.
That's actually kind of cool. But now, does the location of where you're growing matters? When I mean location, I mean like inner city where there's like bad oxygen, things like that, compared to somewhere like Colorado where you have like more pristine air, things like
Um,
that. Does that
yeah,
kind of
yeah.
matter?
Things like that will matter. Especially for indoor growers. Um,
What about
they,
outdoor growers?
I mean, it still will. I mean, because it's weird to think, but like the more pollutants in the air above it, the less the light actually like reaches. Um, but it's also
What about like air circulation?
yeah, air circulation is pretty important to like an indoor grower. I mean, outdoor as well. I mean, like that, things like that prevent like mold. A lot, yeah, humidity, temperature are also kind of aimed at that, as well as making the plant comfortable. Um, so like, and those things will change how you have to react, right? Like, so certain factors when like if you're an indoor grower in a very hot climate, right, you're gonna be kind of blasting that AC. You're gonna be you have a harder time in the hotter time, keeping it in the stable range, and then vice versa, keeping the heat up in the cold.
So
um
so and this leads into my other thing. So do you have more control in terms of like maximizing and controlling the amount of yield you make if in indoor growing versus outdoor growing? You have a little bit more control and say,
a little
I
bit,
guess.
yeah. um There's things that are, like, unavoidable, like, indoor growing, you will, like, almost always encounter pests of some kind,
Yeah.
right? They will find a way in. Um,
As
they
opposed to outdoor growing, though?
yeah, but outdoors, they build up kind of like a natural, um, resistance, but also, like, outdoor, be spraying, whether organic or, regular pesticides, depending, on your choice. Um, so, like, there's things you do with outdoor growing that like people don't typically. Well, they do, but like it's less common from what I know. Spraying pesticides for indoors because
Oh, God.
you'd be
Oh,
trapped
God.
indoors. I don't think
Yeah,
anyone
maybe
does it.
not
I'm sure
spraying the
there- there's
pesticides, but
there's plenty of natural like kind of
so you're saying
pesticides
that they
that
do
indoor
the
growers use.
pesticides
Yeah, it's
in
just
outdoors.
different. Yeah, it's outdoor growers. They kind of have the option for like the intense pesticides, and they can like keep
Gotcha.
um.
You hear about that
But
sometimes.
yeah, and not everyone does it, but it is I'd imagine a factor.
So
So
we've talked about the environment, and we've talked about superplant and potentially genetics. Um, but one thing I think is a good nuance here is like the life cycle of the plant, and
Mhm.
basically, are there times during the process of growing that maybe a grower wants to pay attention to and maybe start like looking at it like, okay, we've reached this process. Now's a good time to give it max light or like,
Uh,
yeah.
yeah, kinda. Um, so I mean, like in the early stages, you don't really need light, right? Until you have the first leaf out, it's not collecting light.
When leaves,
Um,
then light.
yeah.
Okay.
Um, secondly, um, basically, once it has leaves, indoor you can keep the light on all time. Um, you do, got to worry about distance. Like I said before, heat is a thing. You can burn your plants with the light. And also, if it's too far away, then your plant's going to stretch. So you have to, kind of find the sweet spot for it. And then there is um, things like uh, marijuana is photosensitive. So, like, one of the things that'll trigger it to switch stages is the light cycle. If you switch to a 12-hour light cycle, it'll go into flowering or begin the process. Towards the end, when you're harvesting, it's important to check, for the like 70-30 milky to amber ratio on your trichomes, and that's a generally a good time to begin the harvest and whatnot.
Do you just know that, or can you test that during the growing phase?
Um. So, ooh, what the which
The
the trichome?
trichome, yeah.
I mean, you should kind of always be looking at your trichomes. I mean, you need like a microscope, get a good
Interesting.
view of them. But like throughout the entire thing, you should be checking trichome development. Once it's begun. Um,
And does that ever get into like when we're talking about like trimming or pruning or anything like that?
what do you mean by that?
So especially when we're talking about maximizing yields, right?
Mm.
Do we ever get into like trimming, pruning, and then does that ever help
I mean
maximizing
that
yields?
that does help. I mean
Like the
trimming.
pruning I kind of get
Yeah,
with,
yeah, that's kind of clear. If
yeah.
you trim too much or you cut into the bud, right, you're losing yield there. Um, I mean, you can lose yield, in the drying process. You got to be really careful. Burp your containers, because you don't want like
Burp.
mold. Make sure.
You got to burp the
Yeah,
containers.
burping is so when you get to the curing, you've dried your plants. You dried your buds. You take off your buds from the branches, or and then put them in a jar, and keep the humidity. Usually, people use the humidity packs. And then every so often, you will open the lid, let the gases that are building up out, and then close the lid. They call it burping.
And generally like that everyone's gonna have to do for all
Yeah,
the marijuana.
you have to do it. Otherwise, all your stuff will go moldy.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Big X. And
yeah, yeah. Big bad. You will
you
lose
lose
the whole
yield.
jar.
Yeah,
Yeah,
then you lose yield.
then you lose yield.
Okay. So we've talked about the environment, we've talked about superplant, we've talked about the life cycles. Now, let's talk about some outside factors, right? Let's talk about
Hmm.
some things that are like let's talk about insects for example, right? Like
Hmm.
what do insects play a role in increasing or decreasing yield?
Definitely decreasing.
Yeah. Are they eaters? Are they hungry?
Yeah. I mean, they tons of things. Spider mites, aphids.
And they love this,
Um,
or it's just like they'll like it?
um, that I don't know if they will come commonly.
Okay.
Uh,
That's good
I
enough
don't
or
know
bad enough.
exactly what about it attracts them, but it is a majorly common occurrence with them.
What's like the
Uh,
most common insect that you'd see when growing?
Probably aphids.
Okay. And then how big of a problem is that?
They like two things. Typically, they bring ants. Because like aphids and ants have a kind of like um
No way.
synergistic lifestyle. Yeah,
Okay.
the ants protect the aphids. I forget
Wow.
what the aphids do for the ants. I think they share food or something like that. Um, but yeah. So there's one. The introduction of ants, and depending on what ants you got around you, they might also to tear apart your plant.
Oh.
But they, the aphids themselves, chew at the plant. I believe they'll even go like down and chew at the roots.
And
Um,
just to clarify, do you think that part where they're eating at the roots, or maybe they're just like eating at the stems or
mhm.
other stuff, beyond obviously directly injuring the plant, do you think the plant's got like defense mechanisms that it puts up, or maybe it doesn't like that,
I
or
mean, they sort of, depending on the
is it
strain. I'd
negligible?
imagine some of them have uh like a I forget what it's called. Some plants do, especially the ones born and raised outside. They will develop a kind of
Oh,
like
true.
resistance to them. That's why it's more of a problem for
The indoor ones.
indoor plant. Not that it's not a problem for the outdoors. It's just they they are a little bit less affected, right?
And do people ever
Mm.
try to like domesticate an outdoor one? You know, by
What, like
growing
an
it
ant?
indoor. No, no, no. Sorry.
Oh, oh.
I mean, I know they
Sorry,
do that,
sorry,
but yeah,
sorry.
but like the outdoor plants, can they throw it indoor? Maybe
Yeah.
maximize the yields by giving it more light and
Um.
do that kind of stuff.
They can bring it um indoor. Though typically you won't get like the max. Unless you like. I'd imagine if you simulate the environment like perfectly,
Gotcha. You need it to react
you
well.
could. Um, but like typically, at least in the beginning, it's hard to kind of switch the two.
Yeah,
But like it's not out of the realm. It's totally like doable. It's
I'm
just
wondering, do
not.
people do it and why?
I'd imagine. I'd imagine they'd leave it to the breeding. I'd
Okay.
imagine. So I'd imagine if typically plants don't like when you switch their style.
Hmm.
Um, so like if you started outdoors, and its generation is used to be outdoors, good. It'll be good outdoors. Um, I've never heard of someone starting in like an outdoor plant or maybe starting an indoor plant. I know at least indoor to outdoor would be problematic. Um,
I mean,
just because they don't have those natural resistances.
can you have the same strain but an indoor
Mhm.
version and an outdoor version?
Yeah,
Okay. So I mean, like I guess that's like another thing, right? Like when someone's trying to grow something, do they have to order an indoor plant seed versus an outdoor plant seed?
kinda. Yeah, you
Okay.
do. That it will if your goal is to maximize yields. Yes, you want to do that. I don't know if everyone sits there and knows that it's a super important factor, but if you're trying to maximize your yields, it is important to pick a seed that is bred in similar conditions, or
Okay.
put your conditions around what that plant likes.
So now, thankfully, we got over the insects talk. We don't have to talk too much about insects.
Oh, I have
Hmm.
a question.
Oh yeah,
What's
go
up?
for it.
I have a question. It's a fun question, right? So, like,
Mm.
radiation, right?
Oh,
Solar radiation, nuclear radiation, or anything like that. Like, how does radiation affect plant growth, or like would affect yield growth?
I mean, it's uh, I do not know. Yes.
Well,
Um, like I
I
mean,
mean,
they certain things like heat radiation. You can burn your plants, right?
yeah.
Um,
we did mention this in the last podcast that to a degree, forms of light are are may or may not be beneficial to this, right? So like
mhm.
effectively, I know solar radiation just UV, or maybe not UV, but some of the stuff, some of the light in all this white light from the sun can be, you know, beneficial. We just don't know yet.
Yeah. But I'd also imagine if the plant is not specially suited to eat that type of radiation. Like I heard, and I don't know if this is true. I heard there was like this specific fungus that eats radiation that they put in Chernobyl. I'm not a I'm not 100% sure it
Now
was
they
that
did they
radiation
put that
location.
there
Or
or
no, it like they discovered it
right,
there.
right, yeah.
Sorry, I shouldn't
Imagine,
say put it there.
imagine
Yeah,
they're like, hey, we
imagine.
got to test this out.
Yeah,
We
that's
figured
that.
it out,
I think
boys.
yeah, I think they found it there after
Nature does
years,
that.
and
That's
it was
crazy.
like eating the radiation. Yeah, because I'd imagine now
It's
that
energy.
aspect. Yeah, I'd imagine to depending on what plant. I don't think cannabis. I think if you put cannabis in an irradiated area, it's gonna die. Right?
I mean, that's
But
interesting.
there are plants out there that probably can survive on depending on the radiation type.
So, I mean, knowing that plant like marijuana is this alien plant, not trying to say that it will ever do this, but knowing that, some things can grow like from hydrothermal events to in
Mm.
Chernobyl radiation impacted zones. I mean, honestly, not. I mean,
Yeah,
I don't know how the plants
I don't think
are
I don't
faring,
think
but
it'd be safe to consume because remember it's gonna absorb that radiation
no,
and
that's
then
true.
yeah.
That's true.
But
But yeah,
yeah,
for
potentially it
maximizing
could.
yields,
Oh,
the games you play.
I yeah, I'd imagine 9 times out of 10, it probably wouldn't.
And then
Um,
let's get into this next bit because I think this one's the cool bit people might be interested in. Are there any cool gadgets that people use today that just give them an edge in maximizing yields? Like is maybe there's like things that you can control like parts of like the temperature or things that you can like manipulate the plant with.
um, yeah, there's one meter. Um, Give me one sec.
The
The
yielding
par meter,
meter. Oh, okay.
par meter, PAR. And it kind of like shows you um like the light that's actually reaching your plants. Um,
Oh, that's
yeah,
very useful.
yeah, yeah,
All
yeah.
right,
They're
growers, you
pretty.
heard that. Okay, the par meter. I like that, and
Yeah,
that'll tell you
they
basically
are expensive. I've heard.
that it's so it tells you like the amount of light hitting the plant.
Yeah.
Now, do you point it at it, or do you gotta place it where the plant
To
is?
be honest, I don't know.
Okay, par meter, very interesting. This is something that, not gonna lie, I feel like should be obvious, but it's not. It's not obvious.
But yeah, I like I said, I've never used a par meter. I've heard, you know, loosely, what they are. Um, but I know some top of the end,
Do you know how
top of the line it goes. Not off the top of my head. I can find out in a sec.
I mean, yeah, I mean, honestly, if this is something that users are gonna have to potentially buy to give them the maximum yield, to give them potentially super plant level yield, then they might want to know. I would even think giving your plant at least to test at least one time in your life maximum light.
They range.
Oh
They
yeah,
range.
what
Yeah.
what's like the
Uh,
low end?
they're always around $60. It seems.
Hey,
I see one for 30.
yeah, that's doable. If you want to save your
And
plants,
then
give you
they go up in the several of hundreds.
okay. So it's and is that like a you think that's a qualitative difference or like a brand thing?
Probably. I mean, it's probably the accuracy.
Okay.
Tenths, hundredths, etc. Um, as well as durability and stuff like that. Because A lot of people don't realize like you gotta like constant. You gotta make sure you're like calibrating all any equipment like this. You gotta calibrate, um, or else the numbers are gonna be off.
And so while we're on gadgets,
Hmm.
if you could build any gadget to potentially increase yields, what does your mind go to first?
That uh,
Is it you know watching it throughout the life cycle and then at certain points giving it light, or is it like is it some kind of thing that or like the need could be maybe temperature control related, and then you monitor the plant with a camera and then what do we need, what gadget do you think might be a little out there as far as the tech? We don't know if we can do it yet, but what would be nice to have that might increase yields, do you think?
I don't know, maybe more secure tents, right? Like so, like
Oh,
most tents
that's
I
very
see,
practical.
um, you know, they they're good. They create good isolated environments. Um, but at the end of the day, it's not foolproof. Though they have gotten pretty good in recent days. So I was thinking maybe a firmer, yeah, maybe a firmer structure for a tent. But then I don't know. I'm thinking like if you make it clear, right? Then is you gotta worry about like pollution. But so like maybe I mean, the people put cameras in their tents. I
That's
don't know
that
if
I would
there's really
expect.
any. Yeah, I don't know if there's really anything I could think of
I mean, so I
that
would
would
I
be.
would say, like, say you can put a camera on a plant, and
Mm.
say that the tech or the software behind it is able to tell things like different parts of the life cycle, things like when there's a certain qualitative change that you could normally detect with a naked eye, but right now AI can't. But you know what I'm
Maybe.
saying?
So like something that like I have something that's like probably like way
Yeah.
out
Uh-huh.
technical.
Go on.
Or like if you could theoretically, if you can just first figure out the genetics, then you may be able to see like the actual nutrient numbers you would need to maintain its maximum. Like because if we can like predict height and stuff with plants, with humans, sorry,
I'm
um,
following. Yeah.
right? If we apply the same thing to plants, if we can, we could get more tailored feeding structures per strain, which would lead to maximizing yield.
All right. You scientists know what to do. We'll take 45%. You can keep 55% of this idea. All right. Just make sure you credit it to grow the high. All right. And so now just to like wrap things up, because I think we covered all the internals, the externals. Let's cover some, and this last bit, some a little bit of the philosophy here. This, not even the philosophy, this the broader aspect of this science, which is in terms of biology and in terms of chemistry, right?
Mhm.
So in those terms, how would you basically maximize yields? Is it the nutrients, or like, or potentially, what even is the value of the light here? Is it the photosynthesis? What are we doing here?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of all of them together. Like to maximize yields, you need to do everything. So you need to keep the environment. You need to make sure your nutrients are properly mixed, and that the plant is getting um, the correct amount, not too much, not too little. And then, you also need to make sure things are clean, and light. I mean, definitely, if you can afford it, having a 24-hour light cycle during the vegetative stage, is going to be um, better in terms of getting your maximum yields. Um,
And as far as like as far as the lights go, because I remember
mhm,
we talked about this in the last podcast.
mhm.
What what would we definitively say we should choose if we're trying to maximize yields? I mean, especially when we talk about red and blue light,
Mhm.
or this idea of like the spectrum of light. What is like, I guess, the go-to here?
Personally, I believe LEDs is the way. Um, they when it comes to maximizing yields, having specified light spectrum, going into it, definitely seems like it would give the edge, um, and kind of stability. Uh, HPS, I would say, would be a more user friendly way to do it, but personally, I'm into the gadgets, so I like LEDs.
Can a person study a like the anatomy of the plant and the life cycle of the plant, and would that help them in figuring out how to maximize this? Because
Well,
yeah.
kinda. I mean, like, so when you go through multiple harvests with the same strain, right? You're going to pick up on things that it likes, doesn't like, because either you're gonna make an oopsie and it's gonna tell you, um, or you're going to see good results. Um, so I think it's important for any grower to take notes at like all stages of its life, just like every day, just kind of write about it. See what, just kind of like tell yourself what it looked like on that day, right? And things like that will help you see trends in this plant. See when might be maximum important times to feed, because it's going to more growth during these times. There's things that I think if you studied a specific line of plants enough, that you'd find out maximizing that yield.
And
um
I mean, like, that's, to most people, that's like, okay, we have to like really like learn, so we'll start with growing it, and then we'll take that experience. The next time we'll just get a little bit better, and then the next time we'll get a little bit better. But as far as when they start looking up shit online, I'm sure, I haven't looked it up yet, but I'm sure if I were to look it up this way, the way I'm asking, how do I maximize yields with my marijuana, I'm gonna get either some wild answer or pretty like
oh
spectrum of
yeah,
answers.
there's going to be a wide array of answers,
Some of
because like
them
I
really
said,
cool, some of them kind of
you
crazy.
when you're looking up these ways, always specify how you're growing it, because like I said before, how you maximize outside is not how you maximize inside, and vice versa. So looking up potentially, um you know lots of people have content, so you might be able to find people who grew your specific strain. So looking for people that grow those strains is a good way to get kind of a verified version. So a little bit more digging
and
required.
and that should mean though that, one, for your strain at the very least, but like it's kind of even more insider knowledge now if you figure that out, right? Like,
Yeah,
how to maximize your yields. If
yeah.
you do figure that out for your plan, you don't want to give that up, do you? At least not the
Um,
exact
it
way with
depends.
all the
Yeah,
value, right?
I'd imagine they'd be, semi vague. They wouldn't. But honestly, I don't know. A lot of content I've seen from more recent growers, at least in like the YouTube department, I should say. A lot of them are getting real specific and saying like the exact formula that they use. The weed community, from what I've seen, is pretty close knitted and kind of trying to help each other, which is kind of refreshing in the
Is that
community.
new or
They've always kind of been like this. But like in terms of getting more specific, I am seeing that a lot more in recent videos where probably like even like 3 years back, they'd give ranges on what they'd say would be optimal. A lot a lot of newer content creators I'm seeing like the ranges are either tighter or they're giving like exact numbers.
so I mean I hope we see a lot more of that. Because I mean this industry definitely wants to see more yields and we definitely want to see, the people coming out and sharing their tips with all these new growers. All
There's
right,
a lot of there's a lot of potential for growth in the future.
100%. And I mean I really hope this growing at home becomes more prominent because I think it's the way of the future personally.
Hmm.
All right. So, thank you, TJ. Thank you, Yash. This wraps up another episode of The Grow Room, right? A huge thank you, TJ, for sharing your valuable insights on how to maximize yields. Um,
Anytime, Joey.
Thank you, Yash, for the insightful questions. And, I just want to say to all the growers, if you guys are, starting out and you don't have a lot of knowledge about what are the nuances, what are the decisions that you're going to have to make, take a listen to our podcast, The Grow Room, on Grow the High, on YouTube, on Twitter, also growthehigh.com. If you liked this episode and you want to see more, click the notification bell, hit the subscribe button, hit a like, tell us your favorite way to maximize yields in the comments. And yeah, take care.